Right, let's go to the ugly point now, boys. So, Vu, what is your ugly point?
Actually, really interestingly, because I think, Thorin, you might disagree with me on this one, but about 80% of my research is your information on this is about Astralis being a super team and just the super teams in general. I think it's like a poisoned discussion. I'm so tilted that Launders made a video. I said Astralis was a super team, and Launders is like, the only way you can think that is if you are rewriting history and taking the results into account. So he made a whole video calling me out for being wrong about that. That's not at all my thought process. In fact, I argue the opposite. I think people think Astralis wasn't a super team because they look at Astralis and they go, they were super coordinated. They couldn't be a super team. And also, everyone wants this really nice narrative that CS is like chess. So our best team ever actually wasn't that good individually.
Yes.
They just really played well together. They did play good together, but they also had the best fucking players. Like, they had insanely amazing fucking players. And I just think the whole super team narrative doesn't make any sense, especially because people will say, in one hand, FaZe is a super team. But that also, in my opinion, completely, but they'll say Astralis isn't at the same time. But that also doesn't make any sense because I think there's narrative around the super teams that needs to be important because FaZe has never had the best individual team. They've always been like second or third individually. Is that really a super team when they're in an era of super teams? It's different with Astralis. They were a super team in an era of regional teams. The whole discourse is fucked, in my opinion. But I think, Thorin, I feel like I'm guessing here, but I thought you don't think Astralis. I might have heard you say this before. Astralis is a super team. Do you?
Oh, you want to get my take directly? Okay. Well, here's what I would say. The problem is, it's this difference between the general and the specific. So if we're going generally, what I would say is this. If you ask me what a super team is, because I do think this is an area, like the best example ever is everyone knows the G2 super team of 2017. And what happened is the players themselves, because they hadn't gotten really good yet, used to go, don't call us a super team, we're not a super team. And then all the fans would go, how can they be a super team if they lost at the semis of a DreamHack? And it's like, super team never meant that. Super team is the idea that when you form the team, that the players are so crazy, the names, that it makes you think like this is the Avengers. Now, it doesn't, I will also say, a straw man is this. Not every player has to be super, though, because otherwise there would almost be no super teams. Also, there's very rare you're ever going to get 5 players that are all like that. But I would say, essentially, a team that has something like 3 stars is an obvious one. That's why people say FaZe, because they had the 3 top 20 players the year before Vu. I would say, in the case of Astralis, this is where it's going to get interesting. I think you certainly could make the case they're a super team, because here's the point that people are going to miss. Every player on that team was a contender for best in their role before that lineup was made. So I think you absolutely could. I know what you mean, Vu. Very quickly, the reason I think people say they aren't is what you're saying. The problem is they're a super team in the sense of the names and the status of the players. If you if I even present it, which I'll do in a second, you'll see how it was always an exciting prospect. It wasn't that we had to wait for them to do an Inferno game to go, wow, they are brilliant. Everyone knew when Magus joined, this could be fucking sick. Remember, it was going to be config. If not, these are all super team moves. But I will say, I know what you mean. People think super team, because of that phase with Eco and Guardian, means you just have 5 superstar players and then they all just do whatever they want and Nico go kill and frag, and you definitely don't ever play any teamwork because that's for pussies and people who have to cheat and use teamwork to win. And a super team is essentially, it's like every HLTV forum dream lineup. If you just put the 5 stars in and Kenny S really does op at this site and Guardian does op at that site, and then in the middle, Flusher does a move and then Snacks comes and wins the clutch at the end, and then fucking Clave goes, well done boys. They think that's a super team. The reason why, to come back, you're actually probably going to be surprised, I do think Astralis is a super team, is because, first of all, Astralis already won the major without fucking Magisk. And Magisk was the star player of fucking North. Like, I wrote it down while you were talking here. All of these players got to be contender for best in their role in these years. And remember, Astralis with Magisk is in 2018. So you're listening. So Glaive was one of the best in-game leaders in 2013. Now, admittedly, he'd been in the wilderness, but the name is still a big one. His form wasn't when he came in the team. It wasn't even an IGL, but the name is still a big one. That's even why they brought him back. He was a big name they were gambling on, just like Furia gambled on Fallen now. Then you have Dupree. If people don't know, he was one of the best entries in 2014. That's 4 years before this. Then you have Device. He became arguably the best player in the world in 2015. That's when I gave him that status. Then Zipnix in 2015 was already considered the best support, if you don't know. That's when he started to win 1 million clutches, and he would have like 25 bombs as a fucking shitter support in all the bad spots. And then Magisk, like I said, literally had just been in 2016 in Dignitas. He was like winning tournaments as the fucking MVP level player. And then in 2017 in North, he was still really good. Hence that famous refrain, why did North kick their best player when he was kicked out? That's all before we make this lineup. So to me, absolutely, it's a super team. I know what you mean, though. Like I say, I think people are missing roster construction, and they're going into, like you say, stylistic aspects. Here's an example of why I think they get lost. I do think it was a super team where people sacrificed some of their super elements, and it did become like the squad. That's why people they never did like simple numbers, etc. I think you sacrifice a bit, but I think by all the definitions I do of a super team, they weren't a super team. The expectations were a super team. When they entered the lineup, these names are all amazing. By the way, if it had failed, absolutely, we'd say that was a failed Danish super team, I think.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I actually didn't see Launder's video, but I watched most of your video on super teams, and even just from my own definition of super teams, because just like the way the term that I hear the most when it was used was just like when Kevin Durant joined the 73-win Warriors, that's it. It became a super team there. They weren't a super team before because it was homegrown talent, but as soon as you add a first ballot Hall of Fame type player onto a roster of other first ballot Hall of Fame type players, well, then that becomes a super team immediately. And the thing is that Magisk, because you brought up that interview with Zonic talking about North and when he said that Magisk was the best player on that team, even though Config technically by HLTV top 20 standards was the highest HLTV 20 rated player, but it was that he didn't actually get the top 20 because he missed a couple months that year, but he was still of that caliber to be a top 20 player, and that's why Zonic said that thing about him. And even like on Dignitas, he was obviously the best player on Dignitas too. He had like, what was it? Didn't he have like a record-setting map at a major or something?
Yeah,
like he had some
someone against VP had like 37 kills or something, wasn't it? Something bad like that.
Yeah, exactly. So he was obviously world-class at his position, at his role, and then they were replacing Caribbean for somebody that was also basically like world-class at his role. So, I mean, I don't really think that there was any... I almost feel like if you're... It's almost like the Astralis team then was so reminiscent of the Warriors when they got KD that Magisk joining their team that, you know, you're getting a sensational player for the position. You already had won a major. Think of the Warriors winning a title. And yeah, they didn't win the most recent major, but they had Dupree and Device, who are basically first ballot Hall of Fame players, and Glaive, first ballot Hall of Fame IGL. And now Zipnik's like all-time great support player. And you're adding a player that's basically like the next best Danish rifler in the world. That's what a super team is. That's exactly what a super team is. So for me, I don't even think this is really much of a conversation if you just take like the Warriors example, draw the parallels between them and Astralis. The case is closed for me. I don't know. It's just not even really a discussion. It's like very obvious to me.
An interesting one then, because I think the super team discussion is actually super interesting, because is one player, when you replace one player in a team, do you reevaluate all the players on that team, or are you taking those players when they join? Like, for example, when Cloud9 replaced, they brought in Buster, right? If they brought in someone slightly better, does that make them a super team? Because I wouldn't say bring in Buster. You probably don't reevaluate the 3 players on the roster, because Hobbit, Shiro, Axel, they joined when they were kind of unknown. That's probably not a super team. And is FaZe a super team? Because I feel like the context matters. I feel like FaZe has never been this team that's all the best aimers, you know, that they're not. Cloud9's almost always been better. Navi's almost always been better. Vitality and G2 have at least been close. They've been arguable, right? Is that not context that matters? Or are we saying they're a super team just because they have 3 stars?
It doesn't matter how good the player was when they joined the team, because when Durant joined the Warriors, Draymond, Clay, and Steph Curry were rookies when they joined the Warriors. They weren't all-star Hall of Fame players.
The argument against is going to be that KD was such a huge pickup that it was like if you added Simple to the team.
If you added if instead of Buster you got Electronic, then that's a super team to me. That would have been a super team. You had Axile, you had Shiro, now you have Electronic. That's 3 people that are like Hall of Fame caliber people. If over half of the team is a Hall of Fame caliber team, like this is why probably like I don't know, this like it doesn't really work for me as much in sports where there's like above nine or more people on the floor, because you're rarely going to have 5 Hall of Famers out of 9 or something. But if it's 3 out of 5, it's very doable to have 3 world-class people at their role on a team. And in fact, like that Astralis team, it's not even entirely results oriented because they had already won a major. Like it's not the results after where they won 3 majors. They were a super team when they formed that. And like for other examples of super teams that have kind of like been the definition has been really muddied. I think people are trying to give Liquid a pass like they weren't supposed to be a super team. That was obviously supposed to be a super team. What are we talking about? Like we got Twist, top 20 player in the world. We got Naf. Pretty much the only reason he wouldn't be a top 20 player is because Liquid didn't have the results in the previous year. We had Cadian, who for my money, was not a top 20 player last year, but HLTV gave him the award, and this is kind of like the closest to objective we're
And he was
moving
potentially the best
team.
IGL anyway. You could say that angle too.
Well, yeah, so top 3 in his role, which is IGL, but I wouldn't consider him a top 5 upper. But in terms of like IGL role, it's kind of weird because you have to like try to take those roles separately with Cadian, even though it's supposed to be such a high impact position with the op. But if we take Twist, Naf, Cadian, that's already 3 people who are basically Hall of Fame caliber players. That should be enough. And then you have Skulls is like kind of getting off the hook here, like because you know he's unproven talent. Like he wouldn't necessarily be part of that for me. But then Yukinder, like world class in his role too. When he's not in game leading, when he's just an entry fragger, he's supposed to be an in game lead, or he's supposed to be an entry frag superstar, and that's what he was before he was that's before he was a leader on Liquid. So that was supposed to be a super team for me too. So the most recent Astralis was supposed to be a super team with Blame F and Stabby. And also Liquid was supposed to be a super team, putting together Twist, Cadian, and Af.
Yes. And also, similarly, if they had Nico and Falcons, that would have been a super team as well for similar reasons. Yeah. By the way, the 2 other factors. One, just like I said, it's what you are when you join the team. I would also say, similarly, I also do agree with that premise, which is you don't wait till a team becomes the best, like SK Gaming with Fallen, and then go, it's a super team, because it wasn't. It became, they did that collectively as a team. It's a super team based on the individual things. I'll tell you another principle I would say is, this is why I would say FaZe is a super team, and why even this shit Astralis with Blame F was a super team, because it's the premise that these other people were stars elsewhere and in theory could go elsewhere and be stars. Like I could take Rops, Twists, Brokey and fucking all of these guys and put them on another team and they could be the star player of like the 9th best team in Europe. Of course they could. Similarly, like if you take all the joke of the Astralis ones, they did take what they thought were the 2 stars of Astralis and the 2 stars of Heroic and put them on one team. In fact, I'd even say that's the reason why that's got to be part of the criteria for super teams, is because that's why most super teams don't work. Like the biggest joke about the Warriors one is, motherfucker, there's a world where that just didn't work and then everyone laughs at them for 20 years for doing that move and go, oh, you morons thought it would work, and there's only one ball, idiot, which is what we've all said about every other Kevin Durant super team, isn't it? It's like there's one ball and you all want it. So the real thing is, the joke is this, like the G2 2017 where they never came close to winning a major, and then obviously this Astralis that just failed this RMR. When a super team fails, we can all laugh and see that they tried to make a super team, but I feel like people just take the ones that work and then they either just go, well, they have some team components. It's like, yeah, they're not just literally 5 separate people. They are a team. And then the other angle, obviously, is, yeah, obviously then, when they then win, you go, well, it's just obvious you'd win. You had all the best players. Because, by the way, to this day, that will always be my most hated critique of coaches and IGLs. It's like, but you had all the best players. It's like, do you know how many people didn't win with the best players? Most people in history, you fucking idiots. Meanwhile, actually, some great IGLs win even without the great players. So I do think, like, superstar status matters as well. That's a big thing for me. That's why I even say I will acknowledge that the Astralis one was, even though it failed. You know, go on then, hit me with the rebuttal.
Yeah. So Twist joins. When I look at the FaZe team, Brokey joins. He's not before Rops. I don't. With the Rops pickup, maybe we'll say Brokey joins. He's not really that amazing. He's not really well known. Sure. Twist joins purely because he's moving to Europe. I don't think I probably got a deal from Liquid, I'm guessing.
But so I've always thought it helped that his girlfriend lived in Germany, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Boo. You know what I mean? It's a bit like Device going to Stockholm. I don't know if it was totally fair IP. You know what I mean?
I thought it came out beforehand that he wanted to move to Europe, and so Liquid basically made it happen. That was my understanding. Kerrigan, this is after the Mouse roster where he's like, I thought he was the GOAT IGL, but he wasn't really getting that many props. Sure. And FaZe specifically were not spending money. That's like the narrative, at least in the scene, is that FaZe was not spending money. They got Kerrigan for free. They got Twists probably on a discount because he was already moving to Europe. Brokey, not really all that well known. And then they had just like mega washed Rain and mega washed Olaf at the time. And then you take that roster.
I know what you mean. Yeah, go on.
They're not that good. They're not that good at the time they brought in Rops. I remember saying at the time, Rops isn't going to fix this. unless they also fix their other problems. That's my argument against
Okay.
FaZe being a super team.
All right, here's the problem with that. I know what you mean. Like if you want to do like individual form right before they join, you're right, because like Twist wasn't even that good after Liquid, was he? He had to come to the scoffed FaZe and rebuild himself. Obviously, Brokey was never a superstar until this FaZe clan. Rain was super old. I would just say that's more the name value, though. The name value is insane. Like just these names alone, Rain, Twists, Rops, and Carrigan, forgetting Brokey, those 4 alone's a super team. You know what I mean? Just those names alone. So I would say, I'll give you this one. I will say that one's a bit more tenuous because you are right. We are also sort of projecting backwards a little bit on FaZe and acting like they're all as good as they were in 2022 and 2021, which some of them definitely weren't. I'm with you on that. Like Brokey wasn't, for example. Okay. Right.
Okay.
Is that it? Is there more on the super? By the way, what was the gist of Launder's main argument? Aside from, like, I don't know, shit, man. Oh, fuck, whoa. Hey, I'm not reading that, bro. Anyway, everyone in the chat, fucking give me money or something. What was his good point?
It's hard to say. I was so triggered by being told my own opinion incorrectly.
Oh,
the entire video.
That's my whole life, mate. But yeah, no.
Steam was coming out of my ears the whole fucking time. He argued that FaZe was super team because they because they were a super team from the beginning, and that's his justification for FaZe 2022's being a super team is that the 2017 FaZe they bought Coldzera and Coldzera failed, and then they bought then they bring in Rops and Train. I see a gap there, but that was his argument for them, and I think he had a pretty.
What was his reason that Astralis isn't then? What was his reason for that? Just the thing about they play tactically and they're not like selfish or something. What was it? Something like that?
I would say that's the reason he thinks that, but his reason is that they were not superstars before joining the team. That Dupree's device.
That actually blows my mind because that's where Launders needs to remember that in 2015 he was the guy who came on to do the worst match at LANs I was attending as an analyst and was definitely at the bottom of ye old pecking order and going fucking home early. And the reason why I bring that up is because Launders is fucking speaking out of pocket there. Because mate, if you go back to 2014. The reason everyone flamed the fuck out of Fetish is because all the players were studs. They were all young studs. He had Cage and B in his prime. He had young Device and Dupree, and Zipnix already was crafting that like superstar from a like supportive, no resources role. Then in 2015, when Carrigan took over, the reason they instantly won loads of lands is because Carrigan himself even could up back then. Like they already, the whole time they were TSM and Astralis, if people don't remember, we all used to say it wasn't because Device choked. We used to say the reason it's criminal this team hasn't won the major is they're probably the most skilled team, man for man, in Counter-Strike. We all used to say back then it was logical that they could beat Fnatic. They're the only people that could outgun them every time. So I actually think that's a crazy take from fucking... I'm actually really shocked at that one from Launders, because what's bizarre about that is, like, he's making it sound like Device before, like, the Astralis that wins the major is just like some sort of good player. Like, bruh, we were saying in 2015, why hasn't this guy won the major yet? We were telling Dupree the whole time, years and years and years, you're one of the best entries. Where's your title? What's going on here? That's why everyone hated on Carrigan. People didn't hate on him because it's like, he's just like fucking washed it. No, people thought, why haven't you won the major yet with this team? It was like what's happening to Huxley now, but even more so. Every major, it was like, you haven't won again. You have this amazing roster. You haven't won again. You won all the lands in between. You haven't won again. So I'm amazed that he would have that take. It's such a weird take. Like all those players, like I told you, like they don't all have to be together. Like obviously Dupree, Zipnix and Dupree were all together. But like I said about the Magisk angle, the Glaive angle, fucking other players, like these players were coming in and they were even going to add config. Like I said, they were obviously a superstar team to me.
Like I was ready for the argument because I have so many Thorin, I have so many quotes from you from 2014 videos, 2015 videos.
Say what I just said now, yeah? No, I guarantee it was say what I just said now, right? That they were all like super players. Yeah, of course.
My argument is
I have a good believe it or not, I can remember my own opinions unlike other people apparently. Go on, hit me with it. Give me some quotes. Give me some 2014 Thorin quotes.
Okay. Pugnatio is a CSGO team that contains the best players in all of Denmark. That's you in November of 2014. Get right or Dupree and Device with a 1-2 punch, the get right in forest of the Danish scene.
There you go.
I like that one. I like that one. Pimp in an AMA actually said Glaive is by far the biggest wasted talent of all time in November of 2015.
Yep, makes sense.
Fuck, I've got like 20 of these. I just have
no. By the way, this is why I believe you're right. Because like I say, I'm not just making up now. This is always my take. I always thought it was the other way around. That actually Astralis. It's funny they became eventually.
Magisk, though, actually, I thought that that's why I thought you would argue against, because you in your video about Magisk, you were like, I don't really know if this is like that great of a move. So my argument then was like, fuck it. It's Caribou that made them a super team. They were the second best team in the world. Then they added Caribou, and everyone agreed. You even made a video talking about the Danish super team, and you had Astralis, except you remove Kerrigan and get MSL, and then you remove Cage and B and get Caribbean, and you're like, that's a Danish super team. And I'm like, fuck yeah, that's a Danish super team.
There you go. No, if people don't know, by the way, the reason I was actually a bit nervous on the Magisk one is I always did think actually Config was the obvious choice because Kirby himself was like an entry player, wasn't he? So I always thought, but if you get Magisk, won't it be like sort of a bit too sort of like slow and conservative? And the joke is, well, it was, but it just was the best team ever. So it turned out that worked like a motherfucker, didn't it? So, and also, to be fair, I also do think in that team, Magisk himself was a little bit more of an entry player at times or would be a bit more aggressive than when he was the lurker in fucking Dignitas. So, no, that fair play that you did the research there. I'm actually shocked that Launders himself didn't know. Spoiler, obviously he wasn't fucking listening when he was watching all those videos of his hero back in 2014, waiting to work a Sevo LAN with him and watch him eat cold fries and then verbally abuse a fucking runner for not bringing the fries when they were warm. Here's the thing, I've never even pretended to not be a diva. I just say, it's like that thing I said about Simple earlier. Yeah, I'm the fucking best. What do you want? I think I've earned it. I put all the fucking graft in there. I just did like 3,000 videos. I think I can be a diva. So bring me those fucking fries on time and don't ever tell me what I think about Dignitas 2014 Launders. I'll tell you what isn't a super team. Fucking Launders and Scrawny Casting. Those are just two fucking throwaway 2016 casters who just used to charge less day rates, so they got into some gigs during the online event. Oh, did I say that out loud? Oh, shit, my bad. But it's all right, you're pretty good now, as long as you're not reading out who won the tournament you just watched. I'm always going to be me, Vu. You have to understand that bit. I'm always going to... I don't give a fuck, bruh. I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck, mate. But listen, they did fuck that up. But here's the thing, they are pretty good now, though. I'll give them fair play.
They're very good.
Yeah, they're pretty good. They're pretty good.
I like their casting.
I mean, I will say, it is a bit like when G2 was on top. You got to look at who they compete. They are just competing against Harry and Hugo. So again, fucking hell, you know. All right, they still do finals now, my bad. It's not 2019, okay.
And Henry G2 now.
Mate, Anderson Henry G is that FaZe 2021 team he's talking about. It's like, mate, their best days are years ago. And, you know, are they really even at the top anymore? Isn't that sort of Olafmeister and Rain in 2021 FaZe? It's like, yeah, it's cool you're hearing that, but I don't know. If we want to win the tournament, we should probably get someone good in who's good now. I don't know. By the way, everyone involved, all great friends of mine. Love them all.
Yeah, I know, right? I know. We like these people a lot. We like all these people.
You have to understand, guys, I'm sort of like the jester. I'm the one that's allowed to just come at the king and say all that. Like, you have to understand, Anders would even just go, listen, man, and just go like, and then he'd go into some fucking speech about how Semler held him back or something. He wouldn't really, actually. He's a good guy. Right, let's move on. Yeah. Is that the end of the super team thing, Vo? Was there any last thing?
Oh, I've got a million other things, but yeah, I think that's.
Is there any other actual like more like actual point though, like beyond just like the minor stuff?
No, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff with super teams that other people will probably bring up eventually. That just what is the name value important, right?
Sure.
But you know, everyone kind of goes differently.
I will say it is one of those things that, to be fair, and the reason I've thought about it is because I've just done a lot of this content on my channel over the years. I do think we have a lot of terminology that we never essentially define, and people do just have this like vague thing we're all throwing out there. It's why, if you notice, I've been so ridiculously autistic about the term superstar. I never ever give that term to someone who's just a flash in the pan. You have to actually really be, in my opinion, like pretty much top 5 in the world player, like consistently for me before I give you that status. Because I do think if you throw terms like super team, a superstar, if you put these terms around too much, you just get nothing. It becomes a bland mess of like, you have like 50 you know what I mean? Like, you can't tell me Centaurus is a superstar. He might be a superstar of his team, but he's not a superstar. So I do think it's worth having the discussion and figuring out where people are coming from with that one. Because to be fair, no one ever has defined that term. We all just say it. It's kind of, in fact, it's actually more of a marketing term, super team, really, isn't it? It's not really anything any analysts sat down and figured out what we mean by it. We just kind of did our own thing. Right.
Yeah, I feel like FaZe is the name value version of Super Team. That's the way I thought of it. Yeah.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.